Right, hello. Let me just, there we go. So I'm having to do things a little bit different this week. Not that you're going to notice too much, I hope. So welcome to episode 22 in that week from the Chaff. The reason why will become apparent as I go through, as always. The things that are slightly different is that normally I like to print out my notes, as anybody that has watched this before will know, and that I like to fiddle about with me bits of paper and get it all in the wrong order and continuously make mistakes. But as luck would have it, in a year that's got off to a scorcher, the bloody ink ran out of my printer and it won't arrive until Monday, so I've got notes up on a separate screen here, which I'm not really used to that. I don't really like that method. I'm of a generation where I like my piece of paper. So anyway, it might end up meaning a little bit more reflection in my glasses, or me just sort of constantly staring up like that. I don't know. It's going to be what it's going to be anyway. Right, so as tends to be the case over the last few episodes anyway, things are going to be a little bit different again, but for pretty good reason, I would imagine. In so much that I will stick with running through the Sisyphus complex solution process, covering the next three departments, so that again we're building up that picture of what government looks like and what the changes need to be. And so when you understand later on, if it comes to replicating a system, taking out the bad bits after it's all been fucked up by the latest bunch of morons, then we've actually got a record and a plan as to what it actually should look like. So that's the purpose behind doing something like this. It's forward thinking, basically. So I'll run through those three departments, and then once again FOWEFUN is going to have to go by the wayside, and that could be something that does end up going by the wayside on a permanent basis, but I'll deal with that a little bit later. So let's just get the first things first out of the way, and let's move straight into the actual process itself. Okay, so what I want to do here is start off with the Ordnance Survey. So, stairs up as his notes. The part that I want to begin with, as far as the Ordnance Survey is concerned, that is I want to go with the numbers as the main indicator as to what's going on. So the issue that I have with the Ordnance Survey, because I mean, if you don't understand what it is that they do, and that it's fairly obvious, and that I've put the stuff up there for you to be able to say what their core purpose is, and you can get, you should understand what it is that an Ordnance Survey does by now. I've also made sure that you can see that they are an officially registered organisation and so forth. But with the numbers, I want to be careful that we're starting to identify things in terms of how they're presented to us, and what they are in reality in terms of an impact to the taxpayer. So if you just looked at the numbers that the Ordnance Survey was to present to you, they would turn around and say, well, actually, this is a net contributor to the government and therefore a benefit to the taxpayer because they have a profit of 1.3 blah blah million pounds. Not a lot of money, but if that was to be a profitable proposition, then you'd think, well, okay, fair enough, that's not a burden on the taxpayer. Problem with that is that when you look into where their revenue comes from, and this is how an awful lot of this lunatic socialist mentality comes into play. You look through their clients, or supposed clients, and you won't be surprised to find out that the clients are the government, i.e. the taxpayer. And the taxpayer has paid in 73.8 million to the Ordnance Survey. So when you've paid in 73.8 million and you've made a profit of 1.3 million, I'm sorry, but you haven't made a profit at all, have you, for the taxpayer? You have cost the taxpayer basically 71 million. 71 million, 71 million 600 and whatever the fuck. I didn't write that note down. Basically, you've cost the taxpayer a shitload of money. So when they're turning around and saying this is a net benefit to the taxpayer and to the government and to the country as a whole, it's presented in a false manner. That's the key point that you need to understand. They're not doing their reporting in the way that they should. Now, in terms of them being registered at the company's house and all this sort of stuff and that, and for them to say, well, okay, well, this is money that we're getting. So officially, as far as a company is concerned, yes, it is. It is a profit insofar as that company is concerned. But it needs that bloody transparency now to say, well, actually, insofar as money to the taxpayer is concerned, here's how much they've taken from you. There needs to be that specific level of clarity, which is how these types of things get hidden. So this is a good one to actually show how this stakeholder, was it the stakeholder capital system that old Adolf Schwab is going on about. This is how this sort of shit works. They'll just steal the money from you and then present it as a profit. So further issues with this one are that they seem to be getting involved in areas where it's essentially very questionable. Now, I've taken a look, and I'll have links in the description to 3 of these, and there are others that I'm making a note of and that I'm going to be looking into later on. I didn't want to sort of spend too much time on looking at this particular organisation, but what you can see when you're looking at the main links for this particular supposedly government-owned organisation, you know, owned by the taxpayer, apparently, they're running things like, you see there's a logo up near the top there, and that's called Geovation, and that's essentially their attempt, or their pretended attempt, around venture capital. And this Geovation is what's known as an accelerator program. Now, the problems with those types of scenarios, I have done something along these lines and that with some other departments previously, and that's particularly within the UK research and innovation, but there will be other areas that I'll point to later on. This is again another one of these methods where they turn around and say that it's public and private combination to be able to bring new innovations out and blah blah bullshit. Generally speaking, the private side of things coming into it, and that is not a lot, put it that way. But the issue comes about when they're essentially pushing the kind of taxpayer dependent so-called innovation, stuff that basically will never see the light of day. Usually it ends up being crap. Again, something that I've pointed out before, and like that one that was the because this Geovation is in Scotland, and the one that I'd pointed out before was also in Scotland. This so-called automated road repair system that basically just looks like a fucking great big tank that's going to cause more damage to the road than it could ever repair. But anyway, these are the types of idiotic scenarios. So it becomes this feeding machine of dependency for people to be able to, you know, these pretend companies coming out of universities to just suck on the tit of the taxpayer consistently and never produce anything of any value. So I don't like that sort of thing, and I don't like the fact that the Ordnance Survey is getting involved in this kind of thing either. Then there's another funding organisation that I've got there called Zenzic, to which is costing the taxpayer 90 million quid. Now they turn around and say that the full amount going into that is 200 million. Well, once again, I've pointed out this sort of thing previously. The amount of money that they say as the total that's going to be the private and the public mix ends up being the private sector are the ones that are basically sucking off the taxpayers' teat, and they'll turn around and say, well, but our portion is based from the ideas and the manpower and things like that, and they will calculate that up to being more than what the taxpayer puts in. It's bullshit, like I say. So it ends up being fairly similar to like them reporting a profit when they've actually cost you a fortune. These people are doing nothing. They're turning around and calculating that their value is worth 1.5 times the amount of the taxpayer money that they've taken. It's not. It's just one big bloody con trick. But again, it gets these people used to sucking off the taxpayers' teat, and that's it. And that's what they become dependent on throughout. And it's, oh, well, we just have to innovate a little bit more. We just have to do, a little bit more of this and a little bit more of that. Load of bollocks. Then you've got the one that I find absolutely hysterical. I mean, they really must have come up with this bullshit and that before, without being told what the rest of the plans were, because they've got a program called GetOutside. And there's actually a website for this shit. Turn around saying, we need to encourage people to get outside and go walking around and do all this sort of stuff, and then get arrested. Yeah, great. So, you know, just complete and utter. I mean, even if we weren't living in these totalitarian times like that, where they want to be arresting you just because you're going for a bloody walk, what the hell business is it of a government to be turning around and having a website and some program and that and wasting our bloody money by turning around and saying, well, we want people to go outside? I mean, piss off. Mind your own business, you stupid arseholes, and stop wasting our money. It's absolutely idiotic. But beyond that as well, they've got at least the 6 companies that I've got listed below there, where they either have 100% ownership or around 50% ownership in other private organisations. Now, as much as we've established that various government offices are actually set up as corporate and therefore needing to go through the standard reporting processes, I'm not entirely sure how the taxpayer funding further ownership of other companies works into the mix there, and that the legal situation around that. I'm pretty sure there are some issues with that, and it's not really something that, again, it's not something that government is supposed to be doing, and it's yet more indication of, I mean, this isn't creeping socialism, this is full-on socialism. If you're starting to own all of these companies that are coming out, that are then just feeding off of the taxpayer as well now, I mean, how does that not become owning the means of production? So, oh no, but it's a private company. Oh, is it really? Where'd you get your fucking money from? Apparently you're not as private as you thought. So there's all this sort of stuff that needs to be taken into consideration around these types of offices, because this is stepping well beyond the realms of what they're supposed to be doing. So let's move into another one where, again, there's issues, and it shouldn't take, I mean, it shouldn't take an awful stretch of the imagination to understand that there's something wrong here immediately. The British Business Bank. Once again, please, somebody tell me how this isn't fucking socialism. And it's also probably the only bank in the world that loses money. Yes, I know that some of the casino banks and that have gone bankrupt and all that sort of stuff, but if you're concentrated on what is essentially the basically the banking, as in terms of just being a loan system through into businesses. I mean, even if you open that up into having private accounts as well, so long as you're not entering into the casino banking side of things and that, you should never be able to make a loss. It shouldn't be possible. Just by definition, it shouldn't be possible. But anyway, it's government, so they can fuck up anything, can't they? So this literally is furtherance of a demonstration that the UK now is most definitely under the same kind of conservatives that I first witnessed in the 1970s, which is basically just a bunch of socialists that just ended up destroying the country until the John Hoskins wiring map that then Maggie took a hold of, and that to be able to turn things around, which is why I do concentrate on saying this John Hoskins wiring map is so important to actually understand and recreate, because it fought off this sort of shit the last time we got it. And it's just absolute bollocks, the whole thing. So checking my notes now. Right, so there's a couple of different things with this and that. Yes, it's I mean, it's gone through the National Audit Office and all this sort of stuff, and that where they're supposed to be, you know, performing really, really well. And I mean, you would have to be again one of these bloody technocrat twats, the civil servant type, and that to actually look at this and go, oh yes, you're doing a great job, when you're losing money as a bank. And of course they have to have the fucking, oh, we have to help increase diversity of finance, and there's my response to that. And it's fucking, like I say, it's pure socialism, and it's absolute bullshit, the lot of it. Right, I'm going to go into this a little bit more, because once again this becomes important. Now, take into consideration, because this is supposed to be the bank and that, and helping the small business and that, blah blah blah, and where it does come into quite a clear distinction that what we are dealing with here is the Build Back Better, British Business Bank, Freudian slip, is where you get the definitions around the stakeholders. So you can see the term that they've most definitely forgotten amongst their so-called stakeholders, old Adolf Schwab's version of it at least. So you will have certain people that will turn around and say, well, within these stakeholders, oh, you've got the shareholder, which is the BEIS. Therefore, that is the representative of the people. No, it's not. It's representative of some twat sat in government. That's all that's representative of. Because when you go and have a look at that particular department and who's in charge of that particular department, does that say the taxpayer? No, it bloody doesn't. It's your crony socialists that are in charge of all this shit. So the people that are actually providing the money for this are getting no say in this, no involvement at all. And the key part to it is that, once again, who are they actually going to be giving this money to? When I've put the link in for the report, and it shows you some of the examples of who they give money to, and again, a greater shower of shite you couldn't come across. I mean, anybody that actually understands business whatsoever would never give those companies money, because they're fucking rubbish. So that kind of tells you why there is the loss. But the loss itself is not accurate either. So when we look at the numbers in terms of the income, you remember, as I've said about the Ordnance Survey, where they present themselves as having a profit, but then you have to actually look how much money is coming from the taxpayer itself. Similar thing applies here. I've put up the it's basically the profit and loss, isn't it? Profit and loss. But the thing that you have to understand here, and why I've put these two, highlighted this income at the top, where I've got the grant income and the management fee both as red figures. Both of those numbers, in terms of their income, come from the taxpayer. It comes from the taxpayer again. So not only are they making a loss, but they're also costing us another, 36 million quid. Now, these sorts of numbers and that, I mean, it's not exactly break the bank kind of numbers in terms of money that you get from the whole of the taxpayer. But it's still, once you start putting these building blocks together, and as I have been doing that and adding things up as I'm going along, these ends up being staggering amounts of money and staggering amounts of waste, and setting up this absolutely ludicrous socialist system that just doesn't work. It feeds off people and it gives nothing back. So it's another one of these idiotic bloody socialist ideas that is just, it can't even work from day one. So essentially what we're looking at there then is that the cost to the taxpayer for a bank that plainly doesn't work and needs to get the vast majority of its revenue from the taxpayer, we are basically then being subject to a cost, at least at this stage, because with this sort of shit and that, it usually ends up getting worse and worse and worse. But we're over 38 million quid in the red because of something that they've set up and they obviously don't know how to do it, or rather they do know how to do it in terms of being able to steal from the taxpayer. So with the Ordnance Survey, I would certainly, because I understand that there are certain things that are done within that department that can be useful, it would be very much review and reform of that one. But in terms of this British business bank, this is bullshit. And like I say, this is prime example of what Adolf Schwab's bloody Build Back Better looks like, and the stakeholder capital. It basically means take your money and just screw everything up. They get fat while it lasts, and then they sit back when all the money's gone and go, well, weren't my fault, that weren't real socialism. That's basically what this system is, all over again. It's the same bullshit every time they try it. So that's another office that would be gone. So the third and final one that I'll do this week, certification officer. You know what, you know that this one has got something to do with unions because, yeah, no transparency. So if I tried looking at this one just on its own merits, you'd probably just look at it and I'd go with the same as something that I'd said before and that, because if we go back to the have I got it there? Yes, the Central Arbitration Committee. I'd already said that we'd disband that because I'm not in favour of unions. This is all the same shit. It's all to do with unions. So it's basically covered anyway, and that's how when I do a little bit more, when it comes to the stage in the RASIC to do a bit more of a deep dive in this, you already know whatever the cost is for this, it's going to be a saving because it will be gone. Wouldn't use it. Get rid of the bloody things. So in terms of the process as we are at the moment, like I say, once again, you're not going to be able to read this. Once I've got to the end of this particular department, I will do a program where I show the spreadsheets and everything properly, and that as to how the process is actually working forward, and you'll get to see these in a little bit more detail. But as things stand, just for this department alone, so we're looking at over 18 billion, and it's 7.7 billion over the stated budget. So that's how we already knew that they were in the shit and that, and they would have been reporting the wrong numbers. So it's just a continuation of a shit position that we already knew existed. So then we move into the policy developments, where I'll put the reform and review, and that's, I've just added the OS, which is the Ordnance Survey, and then the abolishing is I'd get rid of that British Business Bank, and then I would get rid of the what was he called, certification officer. Yes, get rid of him as well. So that's where we stand, and we could be looking at, like I say, it's gone over 14 billion in terms of the savings if everything went forward in the manner being proposed so far. So that kind of deals with that particular part of the step-by-step process. Now when I start to go into the next bit, I am going to make some comments, as I am tending to do. Agree, disagree, I don't really give a monkeys. What I'm about to go into is, obviously it does have relevance to what's been taking place over the last couple of days, but it's not just what's been happening in America, it's stuff that's happening here in the UK as well, and I'm sure we can take this into a wider context. Before I do that, I just want to pick up on a message or a comment made in last week's episode in regard to the was it Christina had put some comments in there in regard to how you formulate the question for the isolation of this Ponzi coronavirus. I've taken 2 steps in regard to that, which is that when I'd made my written response on the actual page itself, I'd said, well, how about getting in touch with the people at the Great Barrington Declaration? I've done that myself. I've got in touch with them, and I've also got in touch with the UK government. I've got in touch with that Whitty and Valence to see what the UK side of things can come out with. As things stand at the moment, I'm advised that I will have a response within 20 days. True or not, and what kind of response it will be, we'll have to wait and see. But I have taken on board those questions, and I've asked them, and we'll see where we go. So, in place of FOWEFUN this week. Now, I'm glad to see that there has been some people saying some of the right things ever since what happened out at the Senate, and you'll notice that the picture of the lady there down in the bottom left-hand corner, not the one standing up, and that the lady on her own, that is Ashley Babbitt, who was 35 years old, and she is the one that was shot and killed in the Senate for reasons that don't seem to be particularly clear to me. There's an awful lot of stuff in that's going to be, some of it's starting to creep out, but there's going to be an awful lot more that will come out eventually, I would imagine, especially around that one, because the video that I saw of what had taken place, there was a couple of different parts to that struck me as unusual, which are that, first and foremost, the actual location of where they were, in terms of being near these doors where they're saying that she was shot through these doors, and it was barricaded up and that, and shot through these doors. Well, the number of people that were in that location at that particular point in time, that were included an awful lot of, security, basically in that very heavily armour dressed individuals and that, and holding rifles and so forth, all sort of mixed in together. So why a shot would need to be fired in that location is beyond me to begin with. But because it could be down to the way that the footage was taken or anything like that. I'm not entirely sure. But normally when you have a gun in that close proximity that goes off, you can see some sort of a flash of some description. And I didn't see one. You hear the bang, but there's no flash. Now with a gunshot, it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't. I'm not talking about it lights up the entire room or anything like that. But you can see something when a gun has been fired, but there wasn't one, and that struck me as unusual. But also in terms of the actual situation itself, as to where they were and how many people were in that particular location, why that shot was fired is it's raising a lot of questions for me, and it's no surprise as to the kind of immediate reaction that has taken place and the immediate hypocrisy that is just so flagrant. I'm glad to see that others have been, because I was going to do this last night actually, but I thought I'd give it a moment because there was an indication that there were some people that were going to be making some other statements that I thought, well, I wonder if they're going to make mention of some of this as well, because it should, by now and that, all this stuff should come to people's minds immediately. But when they're screaming and shouting about how terrible this whole thing was, and yet they've given absolutely no consideration whatsoever to everything that took place last year, and particularly because I've got some pictures up there, and that there's David Dawn that was 77 years old, who was shot whilst trying to help protect a friend's shop where he used to help out. He just went over there to try and help, and for the sake of stealing a TV, Black Lives Matter just go and shoot him and leave him in the street. That didn't matter apparently. He didn't get the same kind of gold coffin and moron Democrat pricks on their knees at a golden coffin for a drug addict that goes around and sticking bloody guns at pregnant women's stomachs. He didn't get that kind of treatment at all. The criminal gets it, he doesn't. Then they're forgetting the fact that the people that they've been encouraging for all this time were responsible for killing, what's his name, Aaron J. Danielson, 39 years old, the guy with the white cap on, who, for the great crime of being a Trump supporter, was literally hunted down and shot in the street. And no insurrection act. There's nothing going on. Doesn't matter. They will literally have you executed in the street, and it makes no difference. A few people running into the Senate yesterday, or the day before now. Oh no, can't do that. That's the worst thing ever. No. I've got the picture of a little boy up there. Anybody that doesn't remember him, because again, you know, they like to try to wipe these things out of people's memories. But fortunately, I think a lot of people are actually starting to pay attention and start remembering. But that's Canon Hinant, who was a 5-year-old boy. Now, is this a direct result of the riots that took place last year? Directly, no. Indirectly, yes. And the reason why it was done indirectly is because the emboldenment that the guy had from what had been taking place and what all these Black Lives Matter and Antifa were being allowed to get away with, he thought it was okay that little Cannon, riding his bicycle, happened to go onto that next door neighbour's yard because he'd gone onto his grass and turned around and then gone back onto his own. That was enough for that guy to think it was okay for him to just walk out the door, walk across and just shoot that kid in his head. That didn't matter apparently. None of these things matter, and there's so many more. So many more. Then you've got a couple of these pictures down below. Pay attention particular to the one that you got the two women on the balcony, with one of them that with the raised hand. That's Elizabeth Warren. And there she is, shouting and cheering at all those fucking lesbian retards and their cockless mates that went storming into the Senate and caused an absolute fucking outrage during the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. That was to be celebrated. Absolutely no difference. But theirs is to be celebrated. They'll stand on the balcony and cheer them up. Because you remember, believe all women, unless of course your name is Ashley Babbitt, in which case then no, apparently your opinion doesn't matter. You're allowed to be shot because if you're not a Democrat, it doesn't matter. Your life doesn't matter. I've got the picture in the far corner there because our very own appeasing prick Boris Johnson made his phone call and made his comments to say how terrible it all was, which kind of makes him forget that we had all of those excrement rebellion twats, and that's a picture of them in our parliament, jumping around with their scrawny arses. And it's you can always tell when they're the lefty women and that. I mean, there they are with their floppy, horrible tits, and I mean, they just look absolutely repulsive. I mean, they can walk around looking naked because they nobody will shag them one way or the other. Filthy fucking creatures. So the thing about that is, again, where the hypocrisy comes in on Boris's side, is that those scumbags went into our parliament. They had been listed as a terrorist organisation because of all of the other ridiculous things that they've been doing up and down the country. And then they were involved in putting together the Climate Assembly, which is now feeding into the Committee on Climate Change based on a complete load of bullshit and lies. And apparently our government policies are going to be determined and advised by those scumbags right there. And Boris is okay with that. But you know, if it's the wrong opinion, no, it's the worst thing ever. Can't do that. But if you're on my side, then yeah, you just go do whatever the hell you want. You kill as many people as you want. You cause as much damage as you want. So here's where I tend to differ from the kind of opinions that I'm hearing at the moment, because everybody's either if we've condemned those ones last year and that we have to condemn these ones this year as well. I don't have to do that at all. And you have these people that are turning around that, I mean, I understand because they, you know, they've got much more popularity and that, and they're being subject to an awful lot of scrutiny and being threatened and all this sort of stuff by the likes of YouTube. But to be perfectly frank, even if I was in their position, even if I had that many numbers watching this, I still wouldn't oblige them, and I won't oblige them now either. So a couple of little anecdotes around this as to how things work in real life, because we've had a lot of these people that are turning around and saying, well, you know, when it comes down to protests and all this sort of stuff and that, everything has to be all peace and love and all this sort of stuff and that, and they cite Gandhi and Martin Luther King, but then, you know, as we've been seeing lately, and that they suddenly decide that Martin Luther King actually wanted everybody to be violent. But there you go. You twist those narratives however the hell you want. I don't really give a shit. There's two parts to this. One is just a little ditto from how I was brought up, and then the other one is a bit more of a serious comment. So basically, as I'm growing up, you get taught certain things by your parents, and some of the things that you get taught by your parents and that actually do make sense and they stick with you. So one of the things that I was taught as a young lad was that you don't pick on anyone, you don't start a fight, but if the fight comes to you, that's a different story. So the first time that I can really remember having this kind of put to the test was when I was about 7 years old, and I was in I think they called it then infant school, and I was in the playground before school had started, and obviously, so this is back in, Christ, what, well, early 70s, put it that way. So something like around about 1973, 74. So I'm in the playground with a mate of mine, and obviously in those days and that, you're not sitting there with Game Boys and all that sort of shit because none of that's been invented yet. So we're playing what's blow football. So you literally just got 2 little goals. You got your straw in your mouth and you got a little ball. That's all it is. So we're playing this game of blow football together. And then all of a sudden, on that, this boot comes out of nowhere and just kicks these little goalposts that we've got, knocks it away from us, and starts laughing and starts to walk off. Well, I haven't got the best of tempers, so I mean, even then. So basically what happened was I stood up, I walked over and I went, "Oi." He turned around, and I'm not going to try and make out like at 7 years old it was some sort of great battle and that, and you know, it was a Mike Tyson type thing. It was none of that. It's a 7-year-old kid, for fuck's sake. It was probably like a girly fight. I don't really care. I took a couple of swings, hit him in the face a few times, and he cried and ran off. And that's what you do when you come across a bully. The funny thing about that was that I only found out a bit later on. He actually was at the school next door, which was from I think at that point, so you like 9 till 12 years old. So basically, that he was, I think he was about 3 years older than me. I think he was the same age as my brothers, same age as my brothers. So I think he was about 3 years older than me. And it turned out he'd gone crying to the teachers at that school, where they turned around and said to him and that, thinking that he'd probably picked a fight with my brothers who were at that school. And their response to him was, "Well, you shouldn't have picked on somebody that was bigger than you." I was 3 years younger than him, and I was in the infant school. But that's the kind of wusses that you're dealing with when you're dealing with these lefty arseholes. That they'll come along and they'll kick and try to destroy everything because jealousy or whatever, or just because they're arseholes anyway. And the only response to people like that is to get up and smack them in the fucking mouth. It literally is as simple as that. They want to start a fight with you? Right, fine, have your fight. If you can't fight, don't kick me game. If you can't fight, don't start one. It literally is as simple as that. So no, I don't believe in all of this bollocks of you can't have violence, you can't do this, you can't do that. Oh, if you say these people were bad, then those people were bad. No. If somebody is constantly poking and prodding and starting a fight with you, don't be surprised if you get smacked in the fucking mouth. It's as simple as that. When they're turning around and saying, "Oh, you know, you should never ever do these things," and that we always have to be call these people on either side when anybody starts anything. What would have happened in 1939? I mean, obviously, in that after we'd got rid of all of the appeasing woofters, the likes of your bloody, what was his name, King Edward, the appeasing arsehole that he was. Once we'd actually got some people that remembered that they were men and had balls down there, your likes of your Churchills and King George. In 1939, what would have happened if they'd have stood there at the cliffs of Dover and said, "Excuse me, old boy, please don't invade Poland." And, "Oh dear, you did. Oh well, never mind. Let's just go back and play bloody billiards or whatever." What would have happened then? No, when somebody wants to start a fight, you fight. So no, I will not tolerate the sort of pansy-ass bullshit of saying, "Oh, you have to say everybody's bad in these scenarios." No, I don't. And especially when they hardly bloody did anything. They didn't go charging through the doors with guns. They didn't go charging through there like some great fat lesbian, acting like complete twats, ranting and raving like fucking lunatics. They went in there to turn around and say, "Fuck you." And good on them for doing it. And even if there were some of the Antifa, even if that comes out and that they might have instigated something, I don't really give a shit. I really don't give a shit. The only thing that I would give a shit about on that one is if they hopefully they should have identified them at the time and beaten the crap out of them. So no, I'm not going to take this stupid bloody pansy ass line of saying that these people like this on this screen right now, people like this, these 4 people that were killed, that somehow you have to just let it all go, forget about them, and concentrate on saying, oh, all the Trump people are terrible. No, I'm not going to do that. And there were a hell of a lot more of that, directly and indirectly. I say, was it $2 billion worth of damage last year from all of the rioting and burning and attacking people's homes? There's 2 different reports that I've seen. One is saying that there were 15 people directly killed from all of the riots last year. Another one that says 30. I guarantee if I looked into it in proper detail, in all the areas of where they've defunded the police and counted up everybody that has been killed as a result of that, of everybody having these police stand back and do nothing, you'd be a hell of a lot more than 30. But suddenly they don't matter either. Yeah, I ain't having it. I'm not having it. So, there is another point that I want to make actually, in that around this I should actually call them by their proper name, shouldn't I? Anti-fact. I am hearing some words to say that, I mean, to a point I understand it, and it is minorly interesting, but apparently somebody's out there doing some facial recognition to determine who these people are, to find out if they were anti-fact. I wasn't aware that we were supporting facial recognition. I wasn't aware that we was going to be supporting stuff that gets used in a Chinese-style social credit system. Careful what you let slip through. Be very careful what you let slip through. So, how does this all relate to the UK and the wider scenario? Because yes, this has been an issue, and because in terms of the police out in the US and the police in the UK, it's a case of 2 different stories. Of where with the police in the US, they're the ones that are being under attack for an awful lot of things, whereas in the UK, it's the opposite. The police are the ones doing the attacking in the UK, all at the behest of their useful idiot paymasters. And it is getting worse and worse, because I mean, from these people that you're seeing being arrested here, it is happening up and down the country, and in certain instances, and some of the videos that I have seen, it is something that you would expect to see in the likes of China. So the kind of socialist system that we have in the UK is quite plainly going into overdrive. And so as much as it is the same fight between what's going on in the US and the UK, it's happening in different forms. But then you kind of have to expect that, because, you know, if they stick to precisely the same script everywhere and that, then it becomes a little bit too bleeding obvious, doesn't it? The one thing where there is going to be commonality, and it'll be commonality soon and very apparent soon, between the UK and the US and every other country really, is when they start to push not only this China coronavirus shit, but they're going to include the climatard shit as well. And I've already done my bit to prove that these people haven't got a clue what they're talking about, and that there is no burden of proof. I've already demonstrated that. Hopefully from the questions that I've put forward and that Christina had sent to me, maybe we'll find out something about this China coronavirus as well. But the climatard policies are going to be coming forward very, very soon, and it's going to hit hard. And what you do have to understand with that is how long that's been in the making. And what I can tell you, in terms of all these arseholes that will try to pretend to say that they're on the right side of everything, well, we already know that they're not on the right side of anything. They are so fucking squarely on the wrong side of history, it is unbelievable. They are right in the exact same corner as the fascists, the socialists, the communists. They're all the bloody same. The only thing they ever bring is death and destruction. And in terms of the climate-hard stuff, some numbers that you may not be aware of how wonderful these people are in reality. What they've done already with their energy policies, which has resulted in energy poverty in a whole raft of countries. I mean, around Europe in particular, and that it is absolutely rife, and the numbers are staggering. But then they've also put energy denial into the African and developing nations. And when you add up the energy poverty and energy denial related deaths, over the last 15 years, it comes to 22.5 million people killed because of energy poverty or energy denial. Was a direct result of. So this is how much these people care about anyone, and which is why right from the very start I've always said these people are just typical fucking not. It goes hand in hand with what the socialists have always done of old. It goes hand in hand with bloody eugenics. They will just kill as many people as they possibly can because they're just fucking mental retards. So the thing is with this kind of makes me think about what the second, as much as I've got to concentrate the core part of the programme on what I'm doing in terms of the recreation of the Hoskins wiring map. I do think that's an important part of what's going to be critical later on. How many years later on, we're going to have to wait and see. Because what these people don't ever seem to get through their thick, stupid fucking heads is that the more that they destroy, they might turn around and have this idiotic build back better. But as I said before, you can't. They never seem to get it through their heads that you can't build anything back after you've destroyed everything because you've got nothing left to fucking build with. And you've got no people to build anything with either. You just end up with a bunch of fucking slaves that have just got no incentive to do anything. So we are going to end up in this scenario of being in for a long haul. We do have to get it through our heads that when you are having a fight, or when you're having a fight like this, two things you have to keep in mind. The first thing is that you don't win them all. And when people start arguing amongst themselves to say, well, we lost this part of this and we've lost that part of the other, that's what happens in a war. You don't win everything. You know, within each battle, you might not win each battle. Your aim is to win the actual war. Never mind the fucking battles. And these battles are really only just going to start getting going, because everything is going to get ramped up so much more. Unless something, like I say, I mean, I have predicted that there will be some huge event take place this year. And what happened on the 6th is definitely not it. There will be something that will really make people wake up. But it still won't be the end of it. And you will not be winning any kind of war within this year. This isn't a 5-minute battle. I know everybody these days seems to think that everything has to be done within 5 minutes flat. It's not going to work out that way. Especially when you've had cunts that have been looking towards putting all of this shit together ever since they lost the last big bugger. They've been sat around twiddling their thumbs and putting all this shit together since 1945. Make no mistake about that. Because all the people that are sitting right in the background and the ones that have been funneling money into the likes of the World Economic Forum and into the United Nations, it's the exact same pricks that funded all of the shit the last time. Same fucking people. So when they've been putting a load of bollocks together for as long as they have, and when you've got so many people that are just prepared to take their monthly paycheck and just shit on everybody and not give a damn, you've got some serious fucking turning around to do. And it's not, it isn't one of these I've clicked it so I want to collect it tomorrow. It's not going to work like that. It is definitely not going to work like that. So you've got to be understanding as to what needs to be done for the long haul. So this is where I'm kind of wondering as to how useful the FOWEFUN segment is anymore. Because it's one thing to turn around and say, well, okay, here's this person, understand who they are. Here's this member of the World Economic Forum, understand who they are. If you don't understand by now, or if you're really not bothering your ass to look at anything and that unless I fucking feed it out to you, then frankly, wait for the day that something big happens and that slaps you around the back of the fucking head, because you ain't going to get it. You have to actually understand some stuff for yourself for once. And this becomes the biggest part of it, that people have to actually get off their arse and do things for themselves. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that I've got every single answer to everything. But what I can do, instead of doing the FOWEFUN segment, is start feeding out some of the ideas for solutions. Because that's where we're really short of things. I mean, it's okay having all these the commentators out there saying this is what's happened and that's what happened and this is what I think of it. And while I mentioned that, and there is a good one on this, have a look at that the podcast of the Lotus Eaters, and that this particular one, I'll put a link in the description. He runs through a lot of the hypocrisy and stupidity of these people very, very well. But as much as good as that is, and as good as a number of others are being, in terms of demonstrating the actual fact, what nobody really is doing is showing what the solutions are. It's all very well and good for them to turn and say, well, okay, well, what we need to do, and that is make sure that free speech is kept in place and that we have conversations with people, if we grow awareness and things like that. Okay, to a point. But the problem is that talking plainly isn't getting you anywhere, is it? So there's got to be something more substantial than just talking. So I'm kind of thinking that the best thing to do in that is to start exploring solutions to all of these problems. And it does actually entail that people are going to have to get off their arse. And it doesn't matter which country anybody comes from. You can do things according to whatever it is that you do in your own country. This isn't about me turning around and saying, okay, well, I'm sat here in the UK, I've got this particular idea that might work in the UK, here you go and use that everywhere else, because that might not just might not fly somewhere else. You know, different countries have different systems, have different mentalities. It's it's up to you to figure out the things that you want to do for yourself. But if something can have commonality, then great. So I'm kind of going to throw it out there to just ask as to whether you think that having something that's more solution based might be more useful than the FOWEFUN segment. I'm looking into some details as to how that might be put together in a very much more practical fashion, because as you can tell from the Sisyphus complex solution, the recreation of the Hoskins wiring map scenario, I do tend to look at things from a much more long-term planning and process base, because one of the things that I do find is a problem is that if everybody just does things on a reaction basis alone, and you'll get a couple of people who do this and a couple of people who do that, what you end up with is a little bit of noise over there that can get ignored immediately, and it achieves fuck all, basically. So there needs to be something that is much more planned. Oh, I almost said central plan, but fuck off. Obviously in that, when you're planning something out and that, you have to have some people that are going to be sitting back and going, okay, right, okay, this is how this works, this is how that works. blah, 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 set it all out for people, and then you can replicate it somewhere else. But no, I'm not talking about central planning or everybody having a collective or anything like that. But it does mean people will have to be working together. And it also means that there's going to have to be some realizations in terms of how people communicate with each other as well, because obviously in that there's going to be a massive clampdown across the social platforms. But quite frankly, I mean, I keep hearing it again from various different commentators where they say, well, oh, we might be taken down and therefore we have to be thinking about this, that and the other. I mean, the way that it gets presented is a little bit pitiful, to be honest. I mean, it is going to be an age thing to a certain degree. I mean, I am of an age, and that way, you know, it was bloody letters in the post. None of this email or anything, nothing like that. And, you know, guess what? We managed to actually survive. I mean, this is the one bizarre thing that I find with most people, is that they seem to think that everything that you've got these days must have been in existence forever, because otherwise, how did you manage to cope? We coped just fine, thanks. We managed to actually get this bloody far and that and produce you spunk buckets. So, yeah, if you get kicked off of if you get kicked off of Twitter and Facebook, or if I get kicked off of YouTube, who gives a shit? I mean, seriously, fucking grow up. It doesn't matter. The vast majority of people are on there anyway, and are just posting pictures of the fucking dinner anyway. It's not important. What is more important is having the different sources. That's more important. Another thing that is more important is being able to make sure that once you've actually understood what it is that you're going to be setting up and how it's going to be formulated, create your own. And understand where you need to create your own. That's a big part that most people seem to be missing. Because an awful lot of them, I mean, like with the guys out at mines and what have you and that, and I've heard that fella talking on Tim Pool saying about the programming, and I can't remember the exact terminology that he used, but being dependent on certain parts of the Silicon Valley machine in order to be able to keep going. Well, don't fucking use them then. I mean, as much as I hate to use things like bloody films and whatever and that for being an example of something, because I mean, you know, films, they're films, they're not fucking real life. But if you consider something like Fight Club, where they turn around and say, well, you know, you have to be careful because our members are literally the people that you depend on. Well, yes, there is truth to that. That is something that you can actually understand. The rest of it, with like your fucking Adolf Schwabs and whatever and that seem to think that we're heading towards having a new version of bloody Star Wars and Blade Runner and that's what the future's going to be. I mean, fuck off, you retards. Use the things that you know make sense. Use the things that you can actually assist with, that's within your capability. And I saw a video yesterday which was an absolute farce, what was intended to be a conversation between James Delingpole and Carbon Mike, and it just ended up being a fucking bitch match between the two of them as to who could do what and who had the answers for this, that and the other. And I thought, well, neither of you do. One of you is a programmer trying to say that you don't have all the answers. Okay, that was fair enough. And then you got James Delingpole turning around and saying, oh, well, we need to understand this and that, and I'm fighting the war. Oh, you write articles, James, for fuck's sake. Get a grip. But if people will actually understand what it is that they do, what they can do, where you work, how much people are reliant on you. Because you have to remember that the people that you're fighting against, by and large, don't really do anything. They're either the politicians that are sat on their arse doing fuck all, the puppet masters at the top that basically They get their money because of the fact that you're doing the fucking dirty work for them. Well, what if you withdraw your labour? They don't get anything then, do they? There are a whole range of different things that can be done. And it doesn't have to be something where you're in everybody's face. And essentially, I mean, play these buggers at their own game. If they've spent those many years putting everything together in the background, and they've only just suddenly come out and made themselves known because they've got such a solid position that they know that you can't do fuck all about it, well then play them at their own game. Develop the things. Have the people, you know, get your numbers together and that, so that you're all actually being able to communicate with one another and say, well, okay, on this particular date we need to do this, on this date we need to do that. If there's going to be any sort of a insurrection anywhere, do a proper one. Don't fuck about with these people. Certainly don't listen to their bullshit. Now, is that going to be something that is then going to be very open and easy for somebody to infiltrate? Probably. But then be careful what you're fucking doing. Be careful who you speak to. You know, none of these things are actually rocket science. So, I want to throw it open a little bit on that as to whether the second segment should be something around solutions, and then something can be set up alternatively offline to be able to take those solutions a bit further. And let's stop pissing and moaning. Let's stop pointing out what's happened. Let's stop acting retrospectively and, you know, concentrating on what happened yesterday or this afternoon or whatever, or last year. And let's think about what's supposed to be taking place in the future. I said that's the whole point of that Hoskins wiring map, is what do you do later on when you've managed to get sanity back, and what is your government supposed to actually look like? How are you supposed to run things so that it does work and everybody can have the levels of freedoms while simultaneously having the support that can be there for when it's needed? Start concentrating on being proactive instead of reactive. And the other part that I want to pay attention to as well is around something that I do tend to notice in terms of a bit of angst in terms of age groups. That because the kids have gone through this education system, which is basically just like an indoctrination camp. When anybody wants to look at the youngsters and say, well, they're a big part of the problem, I would also always answer with, how old is Adolf Schwab? How old are the people that are sitting at the top table in the United Nations? They're not the kids, are they? How old are the people that are sitting in the families that are the puppet masters of the United Nations and the World Economic Forum? They're not bloody 17 and 18 years old, are they? They are the offspring of the very people that tried this shit the last time, and that makes them in their 70s. So all of this stuff, like I say, it's been put in place over a great many years, and so you can't be a 17, 18, 19, 20 year old and having put something together that's been in place for 50, 60 years. It's not their fault. So, but it is our fault if any of them are our kids and we're not teaching them properly. That would be our fault, not theirs. So again, an awful lot of this and an awful lot of anything that gets taken forward, it always boils down to, it's not just about your freedom, it's about your responsibility. Because the only reason why people are starting to lose their freedom is because they forgot about their responsibility. So, I thought I'd throw that one out there, and see what people are really interested in terms of solutions. And feel free, make your own suggestions of solutions. I do have an email that's included for not just for the business side of things and that, but also in direct relationship to this site, and that's the Proton Mail. So if you don't want to write anything directly to the site, as a comment under the site, just write an email. There are things that can be done. There are solutions that can be presented, and they're all based on long-term thinking. It's not a 5-minute scenario. Anybody that thinks this is a case of, oh well, if something happens between now and January the 20th and then Trump suddenly gets back into power again, Lynn Wood, everything that he's been saying is suddenly going to come true, that is going to be the solution and everything's going to be better directly after that. No, that's not true. I mean, I have seen something that's come out mildly interesting in terms of a document that's come out of Italy to do with the company called Leonardo, a company I am familiar with because of a number of years ago I had some conversations with a company called Finmeccanica, who is a subsidiary of Leonardo, and it seems like they have a sworn affidavit of having had some involvement in the election there. But there's so much that keeps on being spewed out. I mean, this particular affidavit was signed on January the 6th. I mean, why would you wait till January the 6th? So, but the key thing is, anybody that thinks that any solution is going to be a literal click your fingers and everything's done and everything goes back to normal and everybody's happy clappy, that's not how it works. It's not real world. It's not real life. Let's let the shitheads that have been watching too many bloody sci-fi films and building up their socialist utopian bullshit in whatever tiny little fart they've got between their ears. Let them be the ones that are completely void of anything that's grounded in reality. Let them do that. Let us actually understand that stuff takes time. Stuff is it can be hard, and it doesn't always work out. And then you move to the next part, and then to the next part, and then to the next part. Especially in this particular kind of scenario, that is quite. I mean, if it was literally a case of, right, there's the baddie over there, we're over here, bang bang, it's all done. It's not like that, is it? It's plainly not like that. These bastards have infiltrated every single element of the buggers that have literally got the power to turn around and, like I said, with the police in the UK, that are going out and just jumping on people for walking down the road. I mean, it's absolutely phenomenal that it's been allowed to get this far. So it's up to us, collectively. That horrible term, collectively. Just not collectively in a socialist term. Because we can all be individuals and just work together to be able to put things right. And that doesn't mean, just in case there's anybody that likes to go off on silly fucking tangents, this is not about, right, we're now going to dig a tunnel and go and blow up something or anything. No, I'm not talking about that. Like I say, real world. There are things that can be done. And yes, there can be occasions when it might be necessary that if somebody's been coming along and poking you and punching you in the face, that you do turn around and hit back. And should those occasions happen, you won't hear a peep of complaint out of me. Because I know damn well that if I'm walking down the street, if somebody starts fucking having a go at me, I'll pop the bastards back. I'm not shy of that. But there are other ways, and more important ways, the ones that will actually see the kind of results that we're looking to achieve, rather than just some little ruckus over here that then ends up not really meaning an awful lot. So anyway, the floor is open. You know, if you want to see something that is based more around the solutions rather than me doing the FOWEFUN part, then it does seem to me like it's needed. It's needed. And like I say, I mean, I'm not a young whippersnapper. I'm not the sort, you know, I'm not like the 18 and 19-year-old that goes out in the fucking uniform and that and starts going fighting on the front lines. You know, I've got to be realistic about what I can do as well. And what I can do is more on the planning side. Well, like I said, I'm not shy of raising my fist when I need to, but my end of things, and that is more on the planning. And hopefully that planning side, together with anybody else that wants to get involved, we'll come up with solutions. Because again, it's not about all of these solutions and all of the ideas, everything's going to come from Paul. No, it's not. The ideas and the solutions are out there everywhere. It's just a matter of being able to have somewhere to be able to say it. And have people that will understand, and people that will be able to turn and say, okay, that's a good idea. No, that's a really shit idea. And the reasons why. So, yeah, and put it all into one big package, lay it all out, do things over time, make sure it's a living document so that you know where all the pieces are on a board. Yeah, do a long-term solution. So anyway, I've probably prattled on for far too long. Like I say, sorry about the thing and that. Next time, hopefully, I mean, more for me than anything else, and that hopefully I'll have me ink ready for next week, and that's what I've got my pieces of paper. So I don't like all of this reading off of the screen shit. Not that I have been doing it as like a prompter, it's just notes, but anyway. So that'll do for this week, for the week from the chaff. Hopefully you understand what that means and why it's relevant to this particular episode. But anyway, I'll continue next week, and at least next week I will be continuing the first half in the regular format, going through the departments one by one again. And I think I've got 10 offices left in the Department for Business Energy and Industrial Strategy, and at which point I will then turn around and just show a bit of what the actual planning sheet looks like now, so that you can see a lot of the workings out and a lot of the data that is coming in behind the scenes kind of stuff. So, right, well, try and have a good week, and let's see what madness, because it literally is a day-by-day occurrence now, isn't it? Every day there's something stupid, so let's see what happens before the end of next week. All right, take care, bye-bye.